your reader this morning. The theme for October is Living Everyday Wonder Finances. The topic for today is Playing with Money. Founder of Unity, Charles Fillmore, has this to say about our topic. Prosperity is not wholly a matter of capital or economic environment, but a condition brought about by certain ideas that have been allowed to rule in the consciousness. And now let's listen to what Eric Butterworth, best-selling author and prominent leader in the Unity and New Thoughts movement, has to say about money. There is little likelihood that your life can become fully functioning with prosperity unless you have a positive and creative attitude toward money. So let's affirm together with conviction. I openly, fully to God's circulation in my life as money. Money, 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 money. And now, Reverend Kathleen.
Things that I really appreciate about this teaching is its perspective on money, on finances. And so how lovely that this entire month is dedicated to helping us clear up any misconceptions, any misperceptions that we have about this thing called money. I want to begin with a story that Ernest Holmes, this is actually one of the very first stories that I heard back in 1989, it was like December 89 when I walked into my very first religious science church, which was the earlier name of our communities. Now it's Centers for Spiritual Living. But this is a story by Ernest Holmes that he once told. And so he invited everybody to use their imaginations and to imagine that a fish was told that he lives, moves, and has his being in the ocean. God, I think do you see where we're going? and lives and moves and has his being in water, actually. But he doesn't quite understand what this means. Imagine the fish swimming north and south and east and west in search of this thing called water. Perhaps some wise old fish might say, in ancient times, our ancestors spoke of a wonderful ocean of life. They prophesied that one day we shall all live in the waters of life, happily ever after. And then let's imagine that the fish all begin to gather together and to pray. And the prayer might go like this: Oh, water, 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 we beseech you to reveal yourself to us. We beseech you to flow around us and through us. And all the while, what's going on? They're already immersed in it and of it. And so this is just such a great analogy of this presence of the divine, which we call God, in which we live, move, and have our being. We are immersed in it. We cannot get away from it. We cannot be cut off from it. The only way that seems to happen is by our perspective. By our perspective. So abundance is ours. It belongs to everyone and everything. This great ocean of life. And think about the different names that have been given to this great ocean of life, which is a universal intelligence. Brahma, Great Spirit, God, Source. I could go on and on with a lot of different names for this one presence. And then the physicists who call it ultimate reality or unified field of all potentiality. And they also use universal mind. and and also the awareness that everything that exists is made out of the stuff of this one presence. Each and every one of us, that divine stuff, that God stuff, in expression and in form. Our bodies are all of that divine stuff that scientists call energy in form, or collapsed light that turns into particles, right? So it's really, when you really focus on the miraculous nature of life and our existence, it is mind-blowing. I mean, if you really contemplate it, it's amazing, it's miraculous, it's mysterious, it's exciting, it's awe-inspiring. And I do very naturally, when I take time to contemplate that, move into a state of wonder. Wow. And I find myself speechless at times with what all this is that we are experiencing and expressing. And then the other thing I love about this teaching that I learned very early on is this thing called the creative process. The creative process. And Ernest Holmes, to me, so beautifully describes this creative process. That how thoughts, ideas, imaginings, what we focus on, all that stuff that goes on in our minds, how that is what is acted upon by universal law, all that creative substance and medium, that God substance around us, and turns it into form and experience in our lives. And so it is going on all the time, whether we know it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. So that's why one of the things I learned in this teaching is beware of what you're thinking. Beware of what you are speaking about. Because everything is creative. It's all creative. Even when you're joking around, and you think you're joking around or making like an offhand comment, all of that is falling into universal law. So it really calls us to be more conscious about what comes out of our mouths and what's going on in our minds, and to begin to master that. So it's becoming spiritual masters of what's going on in the mind. So this month, abundance. We're changing our thinking, maybe up-leveling our thinking about this thing called abundance, and today, this thing called money, and getting a real clear spiritual perspective on what money truly is. So that's my intention today, and so let's begin with money as a divine idea. Many of us have been what Don Miguel Ruiz calls domesticated. We could call it socialized, but domesticated into having very unhealthy ideas about money and a very unhealthy relationship with money. And as a result, one of the beliefs might be that money is bad, evil, not spiritual, or that if you have too much money, it'll corrupt you. Those are beliefs. If we have those beliefs, what do you think is going to happen? Even if you just think money's going to corrupt you, then you're going to what? You'll push it away. You're not going to have that experience in your life if you have that kind of idea about money. And so when you have those kind of ideas, there's this kind of inherent idea that you shouldn't talk about money, that you should pretend that you don't want it. And also there's a tendency to judge people who have it, or maybe even judge people who don't have it. There's a lot of judgment that goes around this thing called money. And there also is a portion of our population that believes that if you have a lack of money, that means you're good spiritual people. So all of that is based on a misperception of what money really is. And so think about it. Everything is made out of God's stuff. Everything that we see is an idea in the mind of God, operating through and as us, as the one mind itself, in expression. And so think about it. That means money is a divine idea. It's a divine idea for a certain purpose. And as a result, it is something that is a symbol, an effect, a result, or maybe a symbol of abundance, the abundance of the one source God. An effect, meaning it's not a cause. It's something that is a result. And so it's, as a result, we don't want to label it as good or bad. It simply is something that, like anything else, we don't call this piece of paper good or bad. It is simply a tool that we use when we're in this time-space reality. And we are spiritual beings. We are actually multidimensional, but this is one of the dimensions that we're operating in, and money is part of this dimension. So it's a tool. So it's really what's happening behind our use of money, the consciousness behind it, that seems like it's good or bad. But it in and of itself is kind of a neutral thing. And yet it's still an idea in the mind of God. I love what Reverend Harry Emerson Fosdick says. He has a book called Money is God in Action. He said, a dollar is a miraculous thing. It is your personal energy reduced to portable form. Don't you love that? Your energy, it's my energy reduced to portable form. And he says, it can go where you cannot, lifting burdens and saving lives. And I think about all the money that is flowing in the direction of the people in Florida, all of the different social justice things that are being done, educational institutions, you name it, whatever it is, this thing called money we can extend it. We can, and think of it as love. We can extend our love across the planet through this portable form of our love called money. John Randolph Price, and I love this little book, that's why I brought it in. I love this little book, and I've used it many, many times. He says that abundance itself is an all-sufficiency of supply in the mind of the infinite. It's the full measure of infinite good. In the invisible, it's the creative energy of God. And in the visible, it is money and other forms of good that we experience in our lives. Again, that just affirms the same thing that we're talking about. Then he goes on to say, because money is an effect, when you focus on the effect of money, in other words, when you focus on getting money, it will actually diminish because you're focusing on the effect. If you focus on getting money, it will diminish because you're focusing on the effect. Listen to this. This is very, very important. So it actually shuts the supply down when you focus on getting money, when you forget what its cause is. So the idea then is to think of money as an outer symbol of an inner source. Money is an outer symbol of an inner source, an inner supply. And the inner supply, of course, is the all that is. And this is where I know it's really mind-blowing, particularly for people who have been in this teaching for a very short period of time, that the entire infinite presence of the divine is centered in each one of us because it's on a different dimension. Remember, in this dimension, everything looks separate, but we're still rooted in the one source. We live, move, and have our being in it, and we draw from it. So when we have ideas, we are drawing from the infinite source. Those ideas then are something that become the things of our lives. So the true wealth is in ideas, the infinite supply of ideas and possibilities that we all can draw upon. So the inner presence is the money maker. The source within, which is the presence of God, is when we focus on that, then money flows more freely. So how does that look? It's like turning within, listening for solution, listening for direction, what is mine to do, to be, and following that. As we turn within to that creative realm of ideas, then it begins to appear and as the flow of manifestation that we call money. I love what John Randolph Price has done, because his 10 basic statements of, and they're on page 30, his 10 statements about abundance help to focus the mind on the true source, and to develop this thing called prosperity consciousness. It's exactly what I was talking about, putting our attention on the source instead of the effect, which allows the money to flow. There are lots of also testimonies in the back of people who used his program. The idea is there are 10. You use the 10 once a day. You meditate on them once a day for 10 or 15 minutes. And you take one each day, and you do it for 40 days total. So that means you'll go through it in 4 cycles. There'll be 4 cycles of it. And I've done this many, many different times over the years. And I always find it gets me regrounded and refocused in God as my source. Not that money, not something outside of me, but everything flows from within out, even though it looks like it's the other way. And then there's this law of circulation, which is what we've been talking about, which was on our affirmation, that money is a way that we circulate the love of God in the world. We receive it and we share it. So that's money as the divine idea. The next thing that I wanted to speak about is money responds to consciousness. And we hinted at that already, where our focus is. So just like everything else that shows up in the physical world, money, of course, is a reflection of the contents of our subconscious mind, our beliefs about ourselves and about it. And a great example of this is when someone wins the lottery. Maybe you have heard about this before. Somebody wins the lottery. They're so excited. They're sure that their happiness has been achieved forever and ever. And they go out, they spend all their money, and maybe they borrow some more. And then by the time they're done, we've heard this has happened multiple times. When they're done, they're in more debt and more unhappy than before they got the money. So this is such a great example of how money responds to consciousness. So what does that say? It makes us, and this is not to lay a guilt trip on anybody at all. I think this is really important, but it's information. This is not about guilt and blame. It's information that helps us understand how we can shift and change our consciousness to get into alignment with a greater flow of this thing called abundance as money. So again, it could be what John Randolph Price just pointed out. It's possible that that person thought that money was the source of their good instead of understanding where their real source is. I don't know. I don't, I can't analyze somebody's consciousness, but it very well could be that that is the thing that ended up with the diminishing of the money and the experience that they had. So money reflects consciousness. Louise Hay said, "Your prosperity consciousness is not dependent on money. Your flow of money is dependent on your prosperity consciousness." There it is again. So to get to the bottom of what's blocking the flow, this is where wonder comes in. I wonder If I'm having a little challenge in some area of my life, and in this case we're talking about finances, I wonder what is blocking the flow. What have I been believing? And remember, these are all things that we've been socialized with, domesticated with in our as we're growing up, and that we're observing. We're maybe hearing it on TV, in the movies, on social media. But what is it? Am I believing in scarcity? Am I, that there's not enough to go around? Which leads me into this next piece, which is releasing the pie idea of money. And the pie idea of money goes like this. In order to be a good person, I must deprive myself of money to make sure there is plenty for everyone. Can you challenge, with what I've just shared with you, can you challenge this statement now? Think about it. I know I've bought into this one. But if you think about it, you cannot drain the abundance of the universe. The abundance of the universe is infinite. It is inexhaustible. You can't drain it. And so, as such, it's important to continue to remember that we are centers of divine operation. I got that idea from Troward. Centers of divine operation. And so, therefore, it is important that we take good care, not only of our body temples, but take good care of our consciousness and what it believes, and remembering that we can change it by changing our thinking and clearing up our ideas about things. So here's some examples that maybe will help to if you're still buying into the idea that there's not enough to go around. If you enjoy wonderful health, does that deprive anybody else of health? If you enjoy a wonderful relationship or friendships, does that deprive anybody else of that? Okay, and it's the same thing with this thing called money or wealth. There is more than enough. And in fact, Thomas Hubble, the person who he's an astronomer who was a great astronomer, whose name was put on the Hubble telescope. He said, there is no scarcity of resources on the planet. There is a scarcity of consciousness. Now, of course, how we use those resources makes a difference. And when we think about it, there is an infinite supply, at least in our lifetime, of solar energy. There's a great supply of wind energy. So the resources are there is the point. It's how we use them. It's the consciousness with which we use them. But there's no lack of resources to live well on the planet. Also, we're learning that the whole thing about plastic, that we either need to learn how to recycle it really, really well, or we need to replace it, and maybe a combination of both. Again, it's the intelligent use of the resources that we have that benefit all. There's no scarcity of resources. It's a scarcity consciousness that we're experiencing. So the bottom line is there is enough to go around. And if we think there isn't, we are perpetuating the global idea of scarcity and consciousness. So look at how many people are here today. How many people? We usually have quite a few people who tune into our Facebook as well. And understand that we are also sharing these same similar messages, not exactly the same because I put my own twist to it, but this idea is being spread throughout all of the centers for spiritual living all over the world. And I know Unity teaches this, and I don't know about I do know other religions teach it as well, because I saw this beautiful quote in here on page 14 by a Tibetan master. And he said, remember that money is the consolidation of the loving, living energy of divinity, and that the greater the realization and expression of love, the freer will be the inflow of that which is needed to forward our work. So again, that's a spiritual awareness of what money is. So we are here to thrive. We are here to prosper. We are here to demonstrate our divinity, to experiment with what our divinity is. And we have all of the resources necessary within us and on our planet to fulfill that exploration for ourselves and for the greater good of all. So let's turn within in prayer. So knowing that right here, right now, in this clear awareness of this thing called abundance, the very abundance of God in which we live, move, and have our being, this great expression of the abundance of life that we see all around us in nature, the numbers of grains of sand, the number of leaves and trees and animals and people and every good thing imaginable, the infinite source of sunshine available for energy and wind and hydropower and all of the other ways in which we can use this thing called energy, which is the stuff of God. And then there's this thing called money, a symbol that we use to exchange that energy of God. Money, my own natural energy yield, the energy of God in which that I yield. And so with great joy and great gratitude, I accept this gift of the infinite supply of God, the one source, and use it consciously, use it mindfully for the highest good of all, which includes myself and others, and knowing each one of us are guided in ways in which we can use our gifts and talents to support the greater good on the planet, to be that love that we are already, realizing we are immersed in that infinite supply of God, just like the fish in the water. And so we do not lack, we do not have any deficit, there's no scarcity of that great good that God is. And so it is up to us then to let it flow. I give my thanks for this truth. I release this word into the universal law of mind, and I invite us to accept this great abundant flow of life with a powerful yes, and so it is. Amen.